Ever since the dawn of ambition, the pursuit of elevation has driven humanity to great heights. In 1924, Mallory and Irvine definitely became the first people on Mount Everest to lose a camera. And in 1937, Amelia Earhart famously became the first woman to fly an airplane directly into the Pacific Ocean. And in 2026, I, Ben Woodier, will attempt to raise the stakes no higher than Norfolk zone elevation. And hopefully won't die. Just hit a dog. Shit. Join me as I attempt to discover topography where there is none. This is Britain's flattest peaks. Welcome to Norfolk, a county where contour lines go to die. In Norfolk, the only thing flatter than the land is the general consensus on it. Here, height isn't just scarce, it's conceptually uncomfortable. Though that's largely due to the inbreeding. In order to navigate this horizontal void, haunted by tractors and people who drive tractors, one must first understand the landscape. After all, how does one navigate land with no landmarks? And instead of providing a long-winded, well-planned, thought-provoking documentary, I've just decided to speak to this strange man in a field. So tell me, sir, how do you make sense of a county that's almost entirely two-dimensional?
It's endless. The horizon. Nothing breaks it. Nothing interrupts it.
So when you're not staring into space, how is it that you cope living in this void?
Sometimes I cry. I cry.
Is that you, Daddy?
You boy?
It's been so long.
My boy.
Having been reunited with my long-lost father, who DNA testing would later prove was in fact my cousin, I continued to search for high ground in the lowlands. Around 5,000 years ago, some of the first communities in Norfolk started constructing long barrows. These were communal burial sites, earthen mounds, deliberately placed and meticulously built. Probably. Officially, these ceremonial sites were just for the dead. But it's difficult to ignore the obvious secondary function. They are raised. In a county so incredibly devoid of a Z-axis, even dead friends and family members were stacked up just to create some kind of variation in an otherwise entirely level landscape. By the time the Neolithic Age had finished and the Bronze Age had begun, around 2,500 years ago, public interest in long barrows had faded, and round barrows became the new cool thing. Still piles of dirt and dead bodies, but they were taller, more refined. Thousands of these barrows once littered the Norfolk landscape. Each one of them was an attempt to interrupt the horizon, or at the very least, slightly inconvenience it in a very small way. Before we plowed them all, but before we flattened most of our ancient barrows, we had the Iron Age, the Iceni, a tribal society occupying East Anglia. They weren't content with simply stacking their dead and piling them into mounds. So they escalated things. The Iceni began moving dirt with intent. Not just mounds, but entire systems. They had banks, ditches, enclosures, entire landscapes, gently persuaded upwards. These earthworks are often considered defensive structures. When the Romans invaded Britain, the Iceni tribe was comprehensively dismantled, despite the efforts of Queen Boudica. These earthworks provided little to no resistance. It's obvious that their true intent was never military, but purely psychological. It was a last desperate attempt to defend against the horizon, a battle which was also lost. The Romans brought roads, straight ones. This did very little to improve Norfolk's situation, which was, of course, entirely horizontal. But then, something completely surprising and predictable happened. The Norman conquest was not led by a man named Norman, but rather William, Duke of Normandy. He would consequently become known as the Conqueror. Historians will tell you his motivations were a broken oath, a dispute over succession, and a legitimate claim to the throne, backed by Pope Alexander II, and therefore, God himself. Plus, there wasn't a lot else to do. But what historians will often forget to tell you, whilst the Norman conquest was responsible for around 100,000 deaths, and while yes, everyone in the way was slaughtered, in many cases, this was preventative. You see, stabbing them with pointy sticks saved them from a much slower, more inevitable cause of death, such as tuberculosis and the plague. Wherever he went, William seized land and generously donated it to his friends to improve it. Somewhere between 600 and 1,000 modern Bailey castles were erected. Each mound was up to 20 meters high, but normally less. It was alleviation with elevation and spears. Spread these modern Bailey castles across the country, and it caused an average elevational gain of 0.08 millimeters. William wasn't conquering. He was contouring. It's a shame he didn't conquer more, when you think about it. But in the 17th century, something remarkable happened. Norfolk stopped fighting the flatness and industrialized it. The fens were not always fields. They were a complex and biodiverse system of peat bogs, reed beds, and swamp people who caught and ate eels almost exclusively. And much like the elusive eel, the fens were difficult to control. This means that they were difficult to tax. This, of course, was completely unacceptable. And so naturally, Dutch engineers were brought in to make everything flat, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. They straightened rivers, cut channels, and installed pumps. And water was told very firmly to leave. This would destroy not only a vast, ancient ecosystem, but also the livelihoods of the swamp people who depended upon it. This was extremely cost-efficient. The result was some of the most fertile farmland in Britain. Dry, taxable farmland, and with only major flooding implications. A lot of the fens now sit below sea level. That's lower than the level of the sea. That's because a lot of the fenland is made of peat. And when peat dries out, it oxidizes, shrinks and disappears. Just like my daddy. First, we tried to fight the flatness. Then, we brought standardization to the horizon. But before 5,000 years of sustained effort to try and tame a county that refused, what was there? Oh. Beeston Bump is probably Norfolk's most well-known hill. Not that there's any competitors. 450,000 years ago, enormous ice sheets moved south across Britain. When they reached Norfolk, they flattened it. But 10 to 15,000 years ago, as the glaciers melted, they generously dumped whatever they were carrying and left behind a group of slightly lumpy suggestions. Beeston Bump is one of those suggestions. And whilst it might seem dull and unassuming at first, this 10 to 15,000-year-old glaciotectonized feature has a secret weapon. Because Beeston Bump forms part of a cliff that drops directly into the sea, it looks far more impressive than it actually is. The immediate contrast tricks the brain into thinking that Norfolk has achieved something. It hasn't. Despite looking almost mildly impressive, towering above the contrasting flatlands, Beeston Bump is only 63 meters tall. That's slightly less than the wingspan of a Boeing 747. Which, as land surveyors and aviation enthusiasts will tell you, is not a hill. Height suggests progress. It implies achievement, that somewhere above you, there is something that is slightly better. But Norfolk did not reach upwards. Our trajectory was strictly horizontal, sideways, and backwards in some places. But what if progress was never about height? What if elevation was just a trick of perspective? A line drawn on top of another line. Truly advanced civilization would abandon the need for height entirely and eliminate all unnecessary variations. They would flatten everything. What if Norfolk was never at the bottom. Because there was never really a top.